This part of Kansas Territory was literally a howling wilderness with little indication of it having been occupied or traversed by white men except the old wagon road which we've been traveling, with here and there a stump and a few chips by the roadside as the mark of some California immigrant.
Within that Kansas Territory was the area that was to become Colorado. The route used by traders to supply the forts north of present-day Denver was the first wagon road across the Front Range. That road was extended into Wyoming by the Cherokee Indians during the California Gold Rush. 10 years later, it became the southern route to the Colorado gold fields. This route that connected Bent's Fort on the Santa Fe Trail with Fort Bridger on the Oregon Trail became known as the Cherokee Trail.
The Cherokee Trail really today is gone. There's slight remnants of the trail in Wyoming and along the Arkansas Platte Divide between Denver and Colorado Springs, but basically the trail is gone. My great-grandparents homesteaded on the Cherokee Trail in 1884. My uncle and my grandfather used to talk about the old wagon road that crossed their land. The local people are very, very interested, but very few understand the full picture, the full story about the full length of the Cherokee Trail. The mountain men, they arrived in the Rocky Mountains shortly after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. All the civilization was basically east of the Mississippi River. The mountain men and the fur traders were in the Rocky Mountain region. The reason was the beaver pelts. It was very high fashion in Europe to have the beaver hats. It was this which really enabled the forts to establish themselves in the present-day Colorado-Wyoming area. Trappers, or mountain men, were very transient. They liked to winter in Taos because of the wine, women, and song. But during the summer months, they traveled up and down the Front Range, accessing basically all the streams and rivers of the Rocky Mountains. Bent's old fort on the Santa Fe Trail was established in 1833 by William and Charles Bent. It was to provide trade goods for Americans, Mexicans, and the American Indians. Bent's Fort was established in 1833, followed a year later by Fort Laramie on the Oregon-California Trail. In the late 1830s, Fort Lupton, Fort Jackson, Fort Vasquez, and Fort St. Vrain. In the mid to late 1830s, 4 forts were established on the South Platte River north of Denver. These forts were trading posts, not military posts. With the establishment of the 4 forts, these trails were transformed into roads that constituted the very first wagon road through the Front Range of the mountains. Rufus Sage in 1842 visited Fort Lupton, which was also known at the time as Fort Lancaster, for the owner of the fort, Lancaster Lupton.
Some 12 or 15 Mexicans were at this time present at Fort Lancaster. They constituted a trade party from Taos, escorting a caravan of pack horses and mules, laden with flour, corn, bread, beans, onions, dried pumpkin, salt and pepper, to barter for robes, skins, furs, meat, moccasins, bows and arrows, ammunition, guns, coffee, calico cloth, tobacco, and old clothes, which were to compose their return freight.
The fashions changed. By the late 1830s, the fur trade was dead. Shortly thereafter, all the forts along the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains were abandoned.
In 1848, gold was discovered in California. It was only natural that the Cherokee, having come from Georgia, a gold mining region, that they also joined in this migration west. The Cherokee were forced off their native lands in Auraria, Georgia, because of the gold discovered on their land in the early 1830s. This forced the Cherokee along the famed Trail of Tears to northeastern Oklahoma. A lot of them were skilled at gold mining. So when gold was discovered in California, they followed the established Santa Fe Trail up to Pueblo, then picked up the Trappers Trail along the Front Range of the mountains. Pueblo was in U.S. territory, being north of the Arkansas River. Mexican territory south of the river until 1848. So Pueblo was really the closest U.S. outpost to Taos, which was the northernmost outpost in Mexico.
Continuing our journey till late at night, we reached an affluent of Fontaine-qui-Bois called Doherty's Creek after traveling a distance of some 30 miles. The creek derives its name from Doherty, a trader who was murdered upon it several years since. At the time, he was on his way to the Arkansas with a quantity of goods, accompanied by a Mexican, the latter anxious to procure a few yards of calico that constituted a part of the freight, shot him in cold blood and hastened to Taos with his ill-gotten gains, where he unblushingly boasted of his inhuman achievement.
The site of the murder became known as Jimmy Camp, which was the unfortunate victim's first name, and was a favorite resting place along the trail.
From Pueblo to St. Vrain on the South Fork of the Platte, a distance of 140 miles, we had a good road. We sought out from this place without road, trail, or guide through the plains and hills. This Bridger's Fort is 48 miles from Green River and 440 miles from the South Fork of the Platte. 36 miles of this distance we had a road, and the balance we had to make our own road without trail or guide through mountains and plains. Thus, you'll see why we've been so long getting here.
They followed the established Santa Fe Trail and then the old freight road up the Trappers Trail to Fort St. Vrain. But from that point north, they were on their own. And the real importance of the Cherokee immigration of 1849 and 1850 is the extension of wagon roads through northern Colorado and southern Wyoming. John Lowry Brown, a Cherokee, was a member of a gold-seeking party on the way to California in 1850.
Came to the South Fork of Platte River.
That would be present-day Denver.
Made a raft and commenced crossing the wagons. Left the Platte and traveled 6 miles to Creek. We call this Ralston's Creek because a man of that name found gold here. June 22nd. Lay by. Gold found.
The next day, they continued their journey to California. But it was this small gold discovery that 8 years later sparked the return of gold seekers, including Cherokee, to the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. The gold rush of 1849 and 1850 was strictly a time when people were passing through present-day eastern Colorado and southern Wyoming. There were no establishments in this area. Their only purpose was to get to California. The mountains west of present-day Denver are no place to take a wagon, so the Cherokee Trail proceeded into Wyoming and then west to take advantage of the low crossing of the Continental Divide. At Fort Bridger, the Cherokee Trail merged with the established Oregon-California Trail, then continued on to the goldfields of California.
June 1859. Started at moonrise and traveled 15 miles before breakfast to a pine forest, very beautiful but sad from the number of graves here. 8 are in view of persons who have frozen to death, one as late as June 3rd, 59. The changes are so sudden even in summer that from being very warm it will be so cold as to benumb the body before fire can be made to warm it. These changes generally occur after a rain or storm of some kind. When the cattle were driven up to start again, they were nearly frantic with the stings of a large horsefly. Patches as large as both of my hands were black with them, and blood streamed from the bitten part for an hour while passing through the pines.
Sunday, June 12th. Thermometer at 6 a.m., 62 degrees. Weather clear and calm. Proceed down Cherry Creek in the direction of Denver City. For want of a better, and in the absence of any name for one of the peaks opposite Russellville, I confer my own name upon it and dub it henceforth Willings Peak.
June 29. Met 3 trains from Arkansas going to California with sheep and cattle. July 2nd. There was a Cherokee train camp just below us. July 5th. Met 2 Arkansas trains. July 7th. Met 2 Arkansas trains with about 1,000 head of cattle. Camped on Cherry Creek. July 10. Met 3 Arkansas trains with more than 1,000 head of cattle.
One need not starve here. Deer, elk, mountain sheep, and other game are almost constantly in sight. And the ground in many places is covered thick with wild strawberry vines, which at this time are in full bloom. Snow fell yesterday, and today on the mountains.
As the modern-day travelers will aware, Monument Hill between Denver and Colorado Springs is susceptible to major storms, no different in trail times.
This is a locality which is very subject to severe storms, and it is here that I encountered the most severe snowstorm that I have ever known on the first day of May, 1858. I would advise travelers to hasten past this spot as rapidly as possible during the winter and spring months, as the storm might prove very serious here.
Charles Michael Fagan died in that snowstorm at Point of Rocks on May 2nd, 1858. The snowstorm lasted 30 hours.
The wolf, high up on the point of rocks overhead, howled most dismally, a farewell to us and a requiem to Fagan.
Groups of gold seekers, including Cherokee, remembered small discoveries made on Ralston Creek and various other points along the Cherokee Trail as the gold seekers were heading for California. And so it was in 1858 that people returned to the Denver area, making this their destination and looking for gold in this region.
Continued our march, reaching our destination, Ralston's Creek, about 6 o'clock p.m. Here, according to statements of the returned Californians, we were in the immediate vicinity of the gold mines.
The strikes were very small, nothing to prompt a major gold rush. So in the winter of 1858-1859, Denver and Auraria had been established, but no major gold finds were made until 1859. In May of that year, gold was discovered in huge amounts in the foothills west of Denver. And so that prompted Denver to become a destination instead of people just passing through, which was the norm before the gold rush.
Routes. Of these there are 3. First, by way of the Santa Fe Road to a point where it crosses the Arkansas River, then up the Arkansas River by way of Bent's Fort, Fountain Creek, and Jim's Camp, to Cherokee Creek, and known as the Southern or Santa Fe route. Second, by way of Fort Kearny to the crossing of the Platte, and up said river to Cherokee Creek, and known as the Northern route. Third, up the Smoky Hill Fork, across the headwaters of the tributaries of the Platte to Cherokee Creek, and known as the Middle or Smoky Hill route.
So the Cherokee Trail was one of the 3 primary routes used by gold seekers coming to the Denver area.
Shortly after passing Bent's Fort, following the California Trail up the river, we got our first sight of Pikes Peak, resting on the western horizon like a small white cloud, which many of us thought it was. But day after day as we marched toward it, the white cloud grew larger, higher, and plainer. Other mountains on each side of it coming into view till in a few days it seemed we were running up against the whole Rocky Mountain range.
The Colorado Gold Rush was also known as the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, not because gold was found near the peak, but because Pikes Peak was one of the few landmarks on the then Kansas Territory.
Pikes Peak, one of those happy alliterations which stick like burrs in the public memory, was now the general name for the whole region.
Basically, the Colorado Gold Rush of 1859 firmly established Denver as a destination for not only the gold seekers, but all the supplies and services and businesses associated with the mining.
Monday, 27th. Started at 7:30. The day was intensely hot and roads dusty. Traveled slow and arrived at Denver 20 minutes before 11. The cabin was on the very outskirts of Auraria, built of logs and mud, with neither windows or floor. 'Tis much better than most of its neighbors, but at first I felt blue enough at the prospect of even trying to live in such a place. When once at work trying to make it comfortable, I felt better. A petition was made of our wagon cover, shelves here and there. I sleep comfortable all night, notwithstanding my fear of Indians, of which about 300 are here.
Monday, June 27th. We came to town at 8:30. We left the main road and came down Cherry Creek Bank and crossed to Auraria on west side. We were very much disappointed to find so large and flourishing towns. We saw lots of men, women, and children, all busy and apparently contented as people are in Decatur. What a great and sudden change. 8 months ago, not a single tent or habitation had here been seen on the town sites. Now, a moving, living, and energetic people are building a great metropolis.
Shortly after the Colorado Gold Rush, we of course had the Civil War, and there was really not a whole lot of activity as far as new routes, new trails, etc. Then in 1869, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad across southern Wyoming. A year later, the Denver Pacific completed its spur line from Cheyenne to Denver. Later the same month, the Kansas Pacific Railroad completed its line from the Missouri River to Denver. In 1872, the Denver and Rio Grande completed its line from Denver to Pueblo. So by 1872, we basically had railroad service from all directions supplying the needs of Denver.
The railroads put an immediate end to the need for long-distance trails like the Oregon, Santa Fe, and Cherokee. There are only remnants now of pilgrims exploring from civilization to sundown, from home to the wilderness, chasing fortune, chasing dreams.
I run all over the town, saw more gamblers and gambling than I ever saw before. And I went to bed wondering what the Anglo-American race was approaching to, and concluded that a universal triumph and a conquest was its destiny, and went to sleep to dream of the dear ones at home.